everyone, and welcome to the Raven's Table. Today we're here to talk about a game called Glückshaus. This was a very popular game in medieval Europe, and it remains popular today amongst medieval enthusiasts. Here's an example of a Glückshaus board. If you've encountered this game before, the layout may have been slightly different, but believe it or not, the layout doesn't matter much. So long as the game has spaces labeled from 2 to 12 with a few pictures in there, we're probably talking about the same game. Glückshaus is a game that originated in Germany in the 15th century, and as I said before, it was incredibly popular. And that popularity extended to both the common folk as well as the wealthier members of society. We know this because the examples of period boards and woodcuts that we've found include versions that were incredibly fancy with things such as inlaid wood, but it also includes examples that were obviously meant for rougher use in pubs and beer gardens. But because this game was so popular, it quickly spread across Europe, acquiring different names and slightly different rule sets as it went along. In Italy, it became known as the Game of the Boat. In Low German countries, it became known as the Zevenzat, or the New Harlequin game. And there was even a very unfortunately anti-Semitic version that became popular for a time in Western Europe called the Wandering Jew. But because of this game's popularity, there are so many examples of period boards and woodcuts that are in museums today that you can see. So if you're looking for inspirations on making your own game, there's plenty to choose from. So let's take a look at some examples of period Glückshaus boards. Here's an example of a wooden inlaid board that dates from the late 17th century in Germany. And remember, boards don't have to be fancy. This example was obviously made for gaming in a pub because it's very plainly made, and it dates from the 16th century in Germany. Here we can see a very detailed board with a classic layout from Upper Germany, dated to 1583. This is a later evolution of Glückshaus from 18th century Italy. By then, the game was known as the Game of the Boat. This example from Holland in 1827 had the name Zevenzat, or the New Harlequin game, for obvious reasons. And finally, this modern version was manufactured in the late 20th century in Germany and refers to the game as the Funny Seven. Now that we've had a brief history lesson, let's have some fun and actually learn how to play this game. The rules for Glückshaus are quite simple and can generally be learned in less than 5 minutes. The minimum number of players for Glückshaus is 2. However, this is a fairly social game and it's much more fun with 3 or more players. And although this started off as a gambling game, when played in a casual setting, it's generally each person will get the same number of tokens in order to play. In this case, each player has 10 tokens. So to start with, all players who are playing will ante up and place 1 coin into the number 7 space, and we'll get into why here in a moment. As we observed before, there are spaces on here labeled 2 to 12, and those numbers correspond with the possible outcomes onto 6-sided dice. If you're observant, you'll notice that there is no 4, and that is a period practice. Some boards in history will have a 4, some won't, and I'll explain why again here in a moment. So depending on what you roll on these 2 dice will determine what happens first or next. So if you roll and your sum total is one of these spaces that doesn't have a picture on it, so 11, 3, 10, 6, 5, 9, and 8. These ones are a very binary choice. If you rolled, say, a 6, if the box is empty, the space is empty, you'll take one of your coins and put it in there. However, if you roll this number again later, if there's a coin in there, you get to take it. So it's either give one or take one. Let's talk about the 7 space. You'll notice that there are a couple of wedding rings there. Well, that's because 7 is the wedding. And what do you do when you go to a wedding? You always bring a present. So anytime anybody rolls a 7, you will always put a coin into number 7, because you always bring a present to the wedding. If you roll a 2, you notice there's a picture of a pig there. That's because that's the lucky pig. And why is that lucky, you ask? Well, it's lucky because you get to now take all of the coins off the board except for the wedding. So any coins that are in these unmarked spaces. And if you roll 12, you notice the crown up here. Well, that's because that's the king. And the king gets whatever he wants. So if you roll a 12, you take all the coins off the board, including the wedding. So the only way to get coins out of the 7 space is to roll the king, the 12. So since there's no 4 on this board, in period, if you rolled a 4, what you would do is you would end up giving a coin to the house, and that's how they would make their money off of all these people sitting around and playing Glückshaus. There's a lot of variations I've seen for casual play. Generally what I will do is if somebody rolls a 4, all the players who are playing the game will go woohoo and take a drink of their favorite beverage. I've also seen variations where when the rolling player rolls a 4, they get to choose where or which space to then interact with. So let's say, this is what we were looking at here, and let's say they rolled a 4. They can then choose to say, okay, well, I'm going to pretend that was actually an 11 and take that one off. They can't obviously choose the 2 or the 12. It has to be one of the unmarked spaces. I've also seen a variation where when someone rolls a 4, the player with the least number of coins gets to make that same determination. So if player 1 here rolled a 4, then the other player would then get to choose which space the other player has to interact with. Or you can just have a 4 on the board just like anything else, and it's treated as one of these unmarked spaces. Just a normal space, no special rules. And that's the rules really in a nutshell. After the first person rolls and the die is resolved, it goes on to the next person and they roll. And it just goes back and forth or around the table if there's more than one person playing or more than 2 people playing. So let's go through a couple of rounds just so you can kind of see how the game works. So the game starts off with these 2 players. Each one antes up into the wedding. And player 1's going to roll. And player 1 rolled a 7. So player 1 puts a coin into there. Now it's player 2's turn. Player 2 also rolled a 7. By the way, 7 is the easiest number to roll on 2 dice because there are more ways to roll the 7 than any other possible number combination. So you need to be prepared to see a lot of coins on the number 7 because it's going to happen a lot. So now back to player 1. Player 1 rolled a 6, so here's the 6 here. There's no coin there, so they just put one of theirs into there. Now it's up to player 2. Player 2 rolled a 9. Again, no coin there, so they put one into that space. A 4. Well, in this game, there's no 4 on this board, so everybody goes woohoo and takes a drink of their favorite beverage. Back to player 1. Player 1 rolled an 11. Player 2's turn. Player 2 rolled a 9. See, in this case, since there is a coin there, they get to take that and put that into their own stash. Player 1. Player 1 rolled a 5. No coin in the 5, so there they go. Player 2's turn. Player 2 rolled an 8. Player 1 rolled an 11. Since there's a coin there, they get to take that. So you can see the rules, it just goes back and forth. It's a very fast-paced game. Let's pretend here for a moment that player 2 rolled a 12. So player 2 is very, very happy. They then get to take all of these coins off of the board because they rolled the king, and the king gets whatever he wants. If he instead rolled a 2, they would have taken all the coins off the board except for the wedding. All of those coins would have remained there. One of the nice things about this game is, let's say we started the game with 2 players, but a third person wants to join. Well, to join, you just hand them 10 coins and they just jump into the game right then and there, and they play until they either run out of money or, whatever. So, and by the way, if you run out of money, you're out of the game, and the person who's left standing at the very end with everybody else's money, they're the winner. So nice and simple, pretty fast-paced game, very social. There's lots of cheers and or groans when someone rolls that 12 or that 2, because there's actually only a 1 in 36 chance of rolling either one of those, just because it's just the way the statistics work on 2 dice. So given that this game was played for such a very long time, there are many variations out there. The version that I've described here is one of the most standard versions out there, but let's go over a couple of the other variations that I've seen. As I've described here, is after somebody would roll the 12 or the 2, all players would then ante up into the wedding again. Sometimes people will play it that way, sometimes they won't. It doesn't really matter, it's your own personal preference. I've seen a fun version where for these unmarked spaces, those spaces can't be cleared until there's a number of coins on there that equal the number. So let's say, player 1 rolls a 6, they put a coin in there. Well, if player 2 rolls a 6 later, they also have to put a coin in there, and you keep coins in there until there's a total of 6 coins in there, because this is a 6 space, and the next person to roll a 6 gets to take all of those. Now, obviously, for something like an 11, that's going to get piled up there pretty heavily. So that version, you kind of have to have more than 2 players playing, or give more starting coins to each player if you want to do that version. But it's fun. It makes the game a little bit more rich. I've also seen there are historical references to this game being a specific drinking game. There's a 1733 edition of the game history book, Palamedes Revidivus. They describe the rules like this. The game starts with each player placing an equivalent amount of money onto all the spaces except for 7. So each player will take coins and put them into each space. And then the same thing with this side. The 2 dice are cast as usual. If the player rolls a number where their money has been placed, they get to take it back. So in this case, what you need to do is you need to keep each player's money pile separate, because you need to know whose money is still there. So in this case, let's say player 1 rolls. Okay, player 1 rolled a 9. Since they still have money in the 9, because in this side, they get to then take it out. And then it's up to goes to the next player, and it goes back and forth like that. If this person rolled a 9 again, they wouldn't get to take any money out because they've already taken it. But if player 2 rolled a 9, they would, because they've still got things there. But the first player to, if a 7 is rolled, the player rolling must take a drink of their favorite adult beverage, usually beer or wine, according to the book. If a 12 is thrown, the player must drink a glass of beer or wine again, but they also get to take all of the money off of the board, including that of their opponent. So theoretically, it is possible at the beginning of the game, if somebody were to roll a 12, pretend that's a 12, they would immediately get to take all the money off of the board, including all of their opponents. So it's a fun little variant of the game. There's a separate version of a drinking game written in the book, and I know I'm going to get this German wrong, Der Siebener Trinket, written in 1740, and the rules are described as like this. All players place a coin on each space. So let's put 2 on each, from each player. Okay. The first player will throw the dice as normal. And should his number contain nothing, let's see, should the space that he rolls, should it contain nothing, they put a coin on there. If it does contain coins, they must take them. And the game continues until one player throws a 7. That player then takes all the coins off the board and starts drinking at the same time. All players load the board with coins again, and the next round starts. So it's because this version, you get to take all the coins off the board if you roll a 7, which, as we talked about earlier, is one of the easier things to roll. The board gets cleared a lot faster. So that's it for today's look into Glückshaus. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Stay subscribed for more historical gaming videos and how to make your own games. So until next time, I wish you all luck and look forward to seeing you again at the Raven's Table.